Good Sunday morning. Thank you for joining me this morning. I am not under any illusions that there are many other places that you can be on any given Sunday morning, or at least other people you could be watching, or other things you could be watching. And so it's always a privilege. I know I say it, but it's always a privilege to be allowed into your home, into your place of living here this morning, just to share with you and to worship with you here today, especially as we're walking through the Bible, walking through Jesus's parables, deceptively simple teachings by Jesus. I am Josh. This is Connect Church. Connect Church is all about connecting you to Christ, connecting you to other Christians, and connecting you into your communities. All three of those are important for Christians, and that's why we are called Connect Church. If you haven't liked us on Facebook or subscribed to us on YouTube or even checked us out on our website, I encourage you to do so. It allows you to stay up to date with everything, allows us to get to know you a little bit better. So I invite you to do that. Facebook is the most up-to-date place to be, and we can stay connected, announce any events that are upcoming. Don't have anything immediately upcoming because it is January in Minnesota, and we are still in the midst of a pandemic, and it's cold. It is turned cold. We've been spoiled with a rather mild winter up to this point, but things have turned, and so it is chilly. But see, we're Minnesotans. It just allows us to appreciate spring, summer, and fall all the much more, and heartily embrace these cold Minnesota winters. If you're joining us from a state, and the only states can be south of here, unless you're joining us from Alaska, thank you for joining us from your little warmer climate wherever you are, and say a prayer for us up here. If you are joining us on either Facebook or YouTube, I'd also just like to invite you and remind you that right now, concurrently with what's going on, there is a live Zoom version of the service going on. So you could hop on over. You can join us next week at 10 o'clock a.m. Central Standard Time. You can find that Zoom link on our webpage if you prefer the more live face-to-face interaction. But it's the same message, just a little bit different format. And speaking of Zoom, I would also encourage you to consider joining us on Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time for right around an hour as we delve in and pick apart whatever we've talked about here on Sunday morning. So we're looking at Jesus' parables on Wednesday night. So it's our virtual small group Wednesday nights, every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. If you are interested, let us know here in the chat. Reach out to us on Facebook, direct messenger, text, call, email, whatever. We would be happy to get you that link. So let's go ahead and jump in and see Jesus' next parable this morning.
Hey, Dale.
Come on in. Pull up some chair. 3 years at San Quentin, huh?
You found out.
Baskin Robbins always finds out.
Look, I'm sorry, all right, but no one would hire me.
Breaking and entering, grand larceny.
Look, I'm sorry. I don't do it anymore. I just try.
Respect. I couldn't be happier about it.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
You really stuck it to those billionaire SOBs. And the more I read about what you did and stuff, I'm like, wow, I know this guy. I'm in charge of this guy.
Well, I'm very happy in this job, and I really just appreciate the opportunity to help
you're
support
fired, of course. I mean, can't really keep you on.
Wait, what? Fired?
Yeah.
Dale, look, it wasn't a violent crime. I mean, I'm a good worker.
No, it wasn't a violent crime. It was a cool crime. I'll tell you what, though, this would be totally off the books, off the records. But if you want to grab one of those mango fruit blasts on your way out the door, I'll just pretend I didn't see it.
Have you ever thought to yourself at work particularly, oh man, this was the big one. Did I screw up enough this time to get myself fired? Man, if my boss finds out about this, I am toast. Or maybe to change direction just a little bit, maybe it's a mark on your record, something along those lines. Maybe it's jail time. or prison time, or maybe even something like a DUI. You worry every time you apply for a job, is this going to disqualify me from the job? Maybe it's an old relationship that was a complete mess and you just hope nobody finds out about. You know, what is too much? What is too much? What is over the line is unhireable or unlovable or just generally unworthy? To the particular point of our parable this morning, what puts us beyond God's reach, beyond His love, His grace, and His mercy? Well, let's look at the parable today and find out. So I'd invite you to turn with me to Luke chapter 18. It will also be up here on the screen in front of you. I am switching things up today, and I'm going to read from the CEV, Contemporary English Version. The Contemporary English Version today. So keep you on your toes, switching Bible versions here. So Luke chapter 18, and I am going to read verses 9 through 14, and I invite you to follow along. Jesus told a story to some people who thought they were better than others and who looked down on everyone else. 2 men went into the temple to pray. One was a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood over by himself and prayed, "God, I thank you that I am not greedy, dishonest, and unfaithful in marriage like other people. I am really glad that I am not like that tax collector over there. I go without eating for 2 days a week, and I give you 1/10 of all that I earn." The tax collector stood off at a distance and did not think he was good enough even to look up toward heaven. He was so sorry for what he had done that he pounded his chest and prayed, "God, have pity on me. I am such a sinner." Then Jesus said, when the 2 men went home, it was the tax collector and not the Pharisee who was pleasing to God. If you put yourself above others, you will be put down. But if you humble yourself, you will be honored. This is the word of our Lord this morning. The thought flow of Jesus, the context of what is going on here in this parable, again, this is something we always have to consider when we're looking at the parables. We established that back several weeks ago. Starts in chapter 17, verse 11. So it goes before even our chapter here this morning. We've got a clear break between 7:10 and 7:11 as Luke changes things up and tells us that Jesus is traveling to Jerusalem. And he's going between Samaria and Galilee. So he's traveling. And what happens then? Well, first, Jesus interacts with 10 lepers and heals them, but only one returns to thank Jesus, and he was a Samaritan. Next, verses 20 through the end of the chapter, through 37, Jesus tells a group of Pharisees that the kingdom of God is in their midst and will be in their midst in the future. He explains further to his disciples that while the kingdom is here now, there is more to come, but not to be worried about it. Be kind of worried about this in-between time. He says, just as you know that someone has died by looking up in the air and seeing the buzzards circling, you will know when the time has come for Jesus' kingdom to be fully here. So in the Christian understanding, the way that we talk about this is that Jesus has come. He's come once. He came, he lived, he died, and he rose again. But he's coming again. He's coming a second time, and we're waiting. We're waiting for that. We're in this in-between time of the kingdom has begun, but it's not fully here yet. And so we're waiting. We're in this waiting period. So what do we do? What do we do in this meantime? Well, Jesus tells us, and he tells a parable in chapter 18, verses 1 through 8. He tells another parable. We're not going to look at that parable this morning, but just as a quick synopsis, essentially, what do we do in this in-between waiting time? Be persistent in prayer and be faithful. Be persistent in prayer and be faithful. That's what you do now until the kingdom is fully here. That's basically it. And then that leads right into the parable we just read, verses 9 through 14. So that's what's going on. And a theme begins to take shape. A theme begins to materialize. Who can receive Jesus' mercy and who are Jesus' people? who can be a part of Jesus' kingdom family. So let's explore this. Back to our parable. Remember, we got to look for a twist. What's our twist? Well, our twist is pretty obvious in hindsight. We're dealing with a Pharisee and we're dealing with a tax collector. I think just about everybody knows. You say Pharisee, bad. You say tax collector, also bad, right? Nobody wants to pay taxes. But now, we'll say Pharisee, bad, tax collector, good. But typically, we've got to make sure that we understand how Jesus' original hearers would have heard this, and the way that we hear whenever we say Pharisee is exact opposite of how Jesus' original hearers would have heard it, or Luke's hearers. See, when we say Pharisee, we think immediately of a hypocrite. We boo and hiss, and we picture some decrepit old guy with a long white beard who's mean, judgmental, and some sort of religious nut that looks down his nose on everybody. But that extremely negative view is better suited to the view of the tax collector as opposed to the Pharisee. So our modern hearing, what we hear is the exact opposite of what Jesus' original hearers would have said. The Pharisees, the kind of the quote-unquote good guys. So for us today, just insert anybody that you would respect, trust, look up to it for advice. That is your Pharisee. That's your Pharisee. So I don't know, whoever you look up to, admire, or go to for advice, that's the Pharisee. Whomever you distrust, dislike is your tax collector. So that's our twist. It's an inverted view, both directions. So the Pharisee, the person that we typically should think of as good, is the one who leaves not pleasing God. The person who we would despise or look down on is the one who Jesus says is justified or pleases. I don't want to get into what that means, but just who pleases God. We'll go with the CEV translation there. So what's the contrast between this Pharisee and this tax collector? Not all Pharisees and not all tax collectors. These two. In this parable, what's the contrast? Verses 9 and 14b show humility. Humility. This parable isn't about, or at least I think the evidence doesn't show that it's about whether or not you can earn your salvation or anything like that. The Pharisees didn't believe that anyway. I don't think it's about whether or not this Pharisee thought he needed God or not, whereas the tax collector did. It's highly unlikely that any Jew, let alone a Pharisee, would have thought that or said that they didn't need God. I think Jesus' complaint in this parable about this Pharisee lies elsewhere. And it's the issue of humility. The Pharisee is certain that he is better than the tax collector. And certainly, he is wrong, according to Jesus. Treating others as if they had little value, or treating them with contempt, is itself against Torah, or the law. We kind of looked at that, the Torah and law, over before this series. See, you can't keep, Jesus you can't keep the law and look down on others. You're not keeping the law if you do everything and look down on others. It's not possible to keep God's law and also ignore God's command to love others. This is affirmed elsewhere in Jesus' teachings, right? The greatest commandment, love God. Second one, love your neighbor as yourself. You can't love God and look down on your neighbor. The issue is about the Pharisee's view of himself compared with how he views the tax collector standing off on the side. The Pharisee is certain of his good standing with God, but he doesn't offer that same, or he doesn't extend that same offer to the tax collector. Righteous acts without compassion and love are not considered righteous by God. That's from a guy named Klein Snodgrass. Righteous acts without compassion and love are not considered righteous by God. This is in line 100% with the Old Testament law. Those who are most self-assured of their acceptance by God ought to take a step back and reflect, particularly if they're looking down on other people. Humility, how we view and see others. The overarching problem with many of the Pharisees, according to Jesus, is their hypocrisy. It's their hypocrisy. You know, my mind, at least when I read this, 9 through 14, is drawn to Isaiah 66:2. Now, Jesus doesn't quote from this, but that's where my mind goes. I don't know if Jesus was thinking of this or if Jesus hears what to think of this, but my mind goes to this. Isaiah 66:2. But this is the one to whom I will look, God says, he who is humble and contrite in spirit and trembles at my word. Isaiah 66:2. Jesus isn't teaching anything new here. He's simply reaffirming what the Pharisee should have gotten from the Old Testament, from his law, from the prophets. The famous German theologian Helmut Thielicke writes that we completely miss the mark if we today attempt to adopt the tax collector's demeanor and babble on with self-deprecation or with self-abasement about our own sin and shortcomings, with our heads hung low, constantly looking at our feet as if God is somehow pleased with this. I think that's good to remember. Another writer points out that it's the Pharisee who would be welcomed in nearly all of our churches. It's the Pharisee who would be welcome in nearly all of our churches. Why? Because the Pharisee looks like me. The Pharisee acts like me, talks like me, votes like me, raises his kids like me, devoted to the Bible and God like me. It's easy to welcome people who are just like me and to extend that offer of grace and mercy. It's not so easy to do that to people who are different, to people who make me feel uncomfortable. Who would you rather sit next to in a church service? Well, probably nobody right now because there's a pandemic. But who would you like to social distance from at your church service? Let's take a step back and do some deep soul searching here. How do we answer this question? Who can receive Jesus' mercy and who are Jesus' people? Who can be a part of Jesus' kingdom family? Truthfully and honestly, we've got to reflect on this. We've got to let this parable dig deep into our hearts. See, the polite Christian answer and the Sunday school answer would be, well, of course, no one. Everybody's entitled to Jesus' grace and mercy. We welcome all people. But while we say that, I'm not so sure that's actually what we live by. I mean, think of some of the events over 2021 so far, and 2020. You know, what about the insurrectionist who stormed the Capitol and has been arrested? What about that person? How about the person who burnt buildings in Minneapolis this summer? How about the current president that was just inaugurated? How about the president that just left office? How about white supremacists, militants, fundamentalists of other religions, Christian nationalists? See, we, myself included, tend to offer grace and mercy and love to some people, but not to others, even though I say that Jesus' offer of redemption and love from this is for all people. See, if this doesn't challenge us this morning, or even maybe just offend us just a little bit, I'm not sure we've allowed this parable to make its full impact on us. We have preconceived notions of who Jesus is willing to forgive and to justify. And Jesus is encouraging us to blow up those preconceived notions. As most of you know, I am a Marvel Comics fan. Well, DC, comic books in general. Comic books have explored this same question. Who is beyond redemption and who is capable of redemption? You know, the X-Men, the Uncanny X-Men, or the X-Men, maybe you've watched those movies or read those comic books. They've dabbled in that with villains like Magneto and Emma Frost and more other characters like Rogue. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, just space off for a second. Who can become an X-Men? Who is worthy to become an X-Men? Former enemies? Those with checkered pasts or not? There's a good, I brought one here along. You can see it here. This is a good, a newer Batman story, White Knight. Batman White Knight. I think it came out 2 years ago, 3 years ago. I don't know. It's newer. It's good, especially with Sean Murphy. I like Sean Murphy. He's done some other good stuff like The Wake, and this isn't the comic book nerd time, so I'll keep going here. Anyway, in this story, in White Knight, Joker becomes sane. He takes a medication that clears him of his Jokerness. I'm not sure how you would put that. And he's released from the Arkham Asylum or wherever, and he runs for mayor. And he runs for the mayor that his methods work while Batman's methods do not. So then Joker becomes the White Knight. Joker's the White Knight. He's the new mayor of Gotham City, and Batman is now the villain. The looming question throughout this whole book, this whole series, that never gets answered really till the very end, and even then, not entirely sure, maybe, is the Joker beyond redemption? Has the Joker truly reformed? The greatest villain of all time, comic book villain of all time, can he reform? Can he be redeemed? Who can receive Jesus' mercy? Who can be a part of Jesus' kingdom family? You know, note carefully, this parable this morning, we're not talking about what comes next. We aren't told. It's not the purpose. We aren't told what the tax collector went and did next. We don't see what Jesus' expectations of him are. That's not the point. If you want a little hint at that, maybe read the next chapter, the story of Zacchaeus. He's another tax collector. This just isn't about what happens next. It's about who can receive God's grace and mercy and be transformed. So back to our original question at the very beginning. Am I beyond redemption? Am I beyond Jesus' grace? Am I beyond Jesus' mercy? Or turning it a little bit to Luke's question, who can receive Jesus' grace and mercy? Who can be a part of Jesus' kingdom family? Those whom we least expect. Those whom we least expect. Even me. Can we put limits on whom God is willing to accept? No. That could either be bad news or that could be good news. It's great news if you find yourself wondering if you're beyond redemption. It may not be so good news if we tend to look down on other people or ignore people that we think are beyond it. Jesus' grace and mercy is for all people. Let's end with a parable this morning. Again, this isn't a retelling of Jesus' parable. It's just to put things in a little different context, try to drive home a point. One year, in the NFL draft, 2 quarterbacks were drafted by NFL teams. Each quarterback approached the podium, shook hands with the NFL commissioner, Roger Goodell, put on his new team cap, and took the jersey with his name on the back. The first quarterback drafted was not happy. Well, being the first quarterback drafted, he was not the first pick overall. This upset him. He said, "Thank God I'm the first QB picked. I'm the best QB you've ever seen. I'm certainly better than those who were drafted in front of me in other positions. The teams that passed me up and didn't take me earlier will live to regret it. On the other hand, the second QB taken simply said, hey, I'm just happy to be here. I'm just happy to have made it through college and just to be drafted. It's a dream come true. I'm going to do my best to make the most out of this opportunity. Thank you. The first QB immediately made enemies and put a sour taste in everyone's mouth, including his own teammates. The second quarterback endeared himself to all. Thank you for joining me this morning. May we reflect deeply on Jesus' parable. Let it speak to us in all ways. Jesus' kingdom, Jesus' grace, Jesus' mercy is for all people. Grace, peace to you this week. Go and live this out. And I hopefully will see you Wednesday night. If not, I look forward to seeing you next Sunday. Go in peace.